Hello and welcome to episode number 17 of the Crisis Intelligence Podcast. Today is Sunday, September 28th, 2014. I'm Melissa Agnes, and this podcast is brought to you by Agnes Day. Let's talk crisis intelligence. Hi Tang, thanks for joining me today. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
Hello, my name is Ting Nguyen. I am a fire captain with the City of Garden Grove Fire Department in California. And one of my assignments is a social media manager for the department.
Awesome. And so what does that look like for you?
A whole lot of extra work, as I'm finding out. It actually, to have an effective campaign, I guess, with social media, pardon me, is that I constantly have to be monitoring our pages, and so I remain engaging with our people, and that's why we have limited accounts. So there's not a whole lot that's getting away from me.
Okay, so what are your accounts?
We have, for the fire department, we have a Facebook account and we have a Twitter account. And then we have something kind of unique for fire departments. It's called a Pulse Point. It's an application for Androids and iOS devices. And it actually notifies users of cardiac arrests, structure fires, major incidents. And then, but more importantly, is on that side, it gives me the ability to send messages out to all end users.
In terms of, how do you use those messages? Let me ask that.
For instance, if there is, let's say, a major gas line that has ruptured, on Twitter, we will, send out the breaking news right away. Major gas line rupture at this location. And then at the same time, I'll go on to Pulse Point and send out a more detailed information as far as what's going on, how long it's expected, and just a little more detailed information. And then part of it is that not everybody has Twitter, so we're using every means possible to reach our citizens.
Which is excellent, and I love that you're using the push notifications with Pulse Points. Do you keep a track, or do you have a record of who has downloaded the app within your area?
Yes, the Pulse Point application has 8 cities in the Metro Cities Fire Authority that we belong to.
Okay.
And we're our own fire departments, the 8 departments. However, people can follow as many departments as they want. To answer your question, though, the last time I checked, we had nearly 900 people that are following our department with the Pulse Point app.
Okay, cool. And do you have any idea of the demographics? Who they are, their age?
No, I wish I did, but okay. They won't disclose that.
Okay, that's interesting. But it's really great that you're taking this initiative as, it's a useful app that people are downloading. Well, obviously you have some people who are downloading it and finding it practical and helpful. And then it's a way that you're harnessing it to push your notifications in times of emergency. That's really great.
Yep.
And so Facebook and Twitter, what does that look like right now in terms of what is the fire department's strategy? So I think it was 2 years ago you told me that you were kind of approached and said, hey, you're going to head up it started with Facebook, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what, when asked if I wanted to head it up, I mean, I didn't hesitate one bit. I took it on. And for anybody that's willing to listen, I tell them my biggest belief and what drives me to constantly be engaging online with folks is that if I leave people to their own devices to figure out what it is that the fire department does, what they come up with may not be what we were looking for. And I've actually experienced this through random conversations with people in the community where they would make statements on what they perceived us to do, and when in all actuality, it's nothing could be further from the truth.
Okay, and that's really important. So how do you find? So that is your overall strategy with Facebook?
Well, that's the belief that that drives us. The overall strategy is to keep our community informed of what it is that we're doing. So without specific sensitive information being released, we let them know major incidents that are going on in the city. Any big events that we're involved in, that's coming up, we give them plenty of notice. We send out safety messages, and this morning, one of our the west side of our city has a neighborhood watch Facebook group, and it's almost like 3,000 strong, and they're active on there. And so we actually have an account on there where we monitor. We don't say a whole lot on there until they bring up, they ask us a question. But this morning I took advantage of it because I just went through some social media training yesterday, which is always insightful. But I just pointed out to folks that, they have a lot of children that have social media also. And some parents are really oblivious as to what their children are doing. So one of our safety messages this morning was that, when people are doing background checks for, prospective employees, one of the first stops is social media to see a person's pattern of behavior.
Oh, that's interesting. And so you're working, do you guys have an agreement or some form of working objective or I guess agreement where between the two of you, if there were some sort of emergency, that you would communicate with each other? And I'm talking about the Neighborhood Watch Facebook, whoever's in charge of that Facebook page, that you guys would communicate with each other behind the scenes to really help each other out with getting key messages out to citizens?
You know what? Actually, right now, no. They approached us maybe about 8-9 months ago to join the group.
Okay.
And just to monitor and chime in whenever it was appropriate. And so it's pretty more or less, welcome, and let's see if we can help each other out. But there's nothing formal right now.
Okay. I noticed I was taking a look at your Facebook page, and one thing I noticed was your fire department weekly stats, which I thought were really cool. So you have just last week. So when we recorded this, it was the week of August 11th. So the week of August 4th, you have 8 fires, 1 hazardous material, medical is 194, other is 6, and service is 14. So how do you find, then you've got responses. You've got 11 people who've liked it, then you've got 1 clever response that says, holy smokes. And then you've got, good job and the positive feedback or input, I guess, engagement from your community. I think that that's a really cool idea in order to meet that objective of letting people know, letting the community know what you guys are up to.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what, we do that, and a lot of people appreciate it, and it's more on those. When I look at the insights for the weekly stats, it's more people that just clicking onto it and seeing it, but most of them won't click like or comment, and I really don't expect them to, but it's just, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is how busy we were last week. And but if they're following our page, or they've liked our page, then when the major incidents happen, then they're actually posted on there with details of what happened.
Excellent. And what about Twitter? Is your Twitter strategy the same as your Facebook strategy? What's the goal there?
Man, I am still trying to embrace Twitter.
Really? Well, it's a good thing that you're on it, because in terms of crisis communications.
Absolutely. And I'm quickly learning that there is definitely a place for Twitter. Just last week, we had one of our ambulances responding to a call, and they got involved in a traffic accident with another vehicle. Okay. And what I found was that the media people that are on there that are following our page, they a lot of the times they know exactly what they're asking me already. They know the answer already. They're just getting clarification, and then they want the support from us to say, yes, in fact, that did happen.
Okay, publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Publicly. And so the emergency responders who got into an accident, how did you were able to? Where did Twitter come in there?
I get notification that a significant incident is happening.
Okay.
And through my phone, and that's internal. And as soon as I get that, I get on the radio and I monitor the radio traffic, and I can always tell if it's a significant incident or not. And typically, when something like that goes down, whether it is significant or not, I'll just send out a tweet real quick. Traffic accident involving ambulance at this intersection. Okay. And people will do whatever they want with it. Some use it as more of a traffic guide for them. Hey, I'm going to stay clear of that area. And others, want a little more in depth.
Excellent. And so in terms of emergency management and crisis communications and all of that, have you experienced or have you explored with that on social media as a means of communication? Is it part of your plans either now already set up or in the future to kind of test the waters and see how that could best be applied for important communications?
Yes, we without having a formal plan in writing, the general direction that the fire chief has given me is that he wants a positive page where it's not always just doom and gloom, on our social media. Mm-hmm. But when the time does present itself where there are significant incidents, we will post, we will share. We have, I have a belief, and I believe the fire chief does too, is that, our citizens do deserve to know what's going on in their city.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And it builds. I love the fact that your fire chief doesn't want just, in his words, doom and gloom. It's very important in terms of building the community and building up a platform where the community can come for regular informations as well, not just crisis communications. Mm-hmm. Look to and know that they could also turn there if they have questions or if there's an incident that happens and they're looking for answers, that is an opportunity or possibility to turn to your pages, which you can't do if it's only ever doom and gloom. You have to have that personality that, to build the relationship.
Yep.
Excellent. And you were just telling me that you were speaking with Chris Shung from Mountain View PD, which I think is they're such a great example of using social media for so many different, more than just crisis communications and more than just relationship building. They're really, really great at pushing the envelope and exploring. Mm-hmm. So I know that you're always looking for inspiration in that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think I modeled myself after those guys and other agencies that I've seen. Huntington Beach Police Department is another one that I've been following. Solid program that they got in place. And, and everybody that's doing this all wants the same thing for their community. It's just create that level of transparency, so people aren't wondering what it is that they're paying for. They know full well what they're getting. And we keep them informed, I enjoy it. I like we talked about in class, it's my opportunity to reach the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time.
Absolutely. And it's not, and I've heard this lately, this week in particular, or last week, anyways, recently, is, that expression, if you build it, they will come. It's Yes. Not like that on social media.
Yeah.
You have to actually actively, like when we started this conversation, you said it's more work than I ever imagined. Mm-hmm. It really is. And it's an ongoing endeavor, ongoing efforts, and where it's continual progress,
Yep.
which is great, but can be it's long term.
Well, you can always tell, and this is a generalization on my part, but I can always tell how much effort a page or the administrators of a page puts into it, based on reaction, engagement from the crowd and, their responses.
Yeah, it's true. It's definitely true. And especially when you have objectives, when you've defined those objectives beforehand, then you can figure out strategies to achieve those objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always interesting, and it's always great speaking with organizations who have those objectives defined and who are gauging, who are experimenting and gauging, okay, well, there was a great response with this. I love NATO is a good example of that. NATO's Facebook page, where they have their own internal obstacles where, just like a lot of government agencies do, where, leadership isn't necessarily sure. People are scared. People are scared of lack of control. They're scared of the unknown. Social media is this new two-way communications portal that scares them. And rightfully so. If you're not prepared, it is scary. Mm-hmm. And yet NATO is they've got this really great team of social media members from within NATO who it's their job to post and share on social and to explore and push the envelope. And they're doing really great things in terms of graphics to draw in attention and bring people who otherwise would not have seen their press releases, their statements, what they're doing, why they're doing it. They would have gone with hearsay, or they just wouldn't know. They're using these really great graphics to draw them in. And so it's really interesting to always look at organizations that are struggling, but who are still being creative and trying new things and evaluating the progress.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And believe me, some of my posts, even after 2 years, flop, where there's barely anybody that's reacting to it. But you learn from it. You look at that and you look at other people's pages and what they're doing, and then you got to go on from there. It's, what, I see things differently, and my crew always, they're super about it because they will entertain me when I ask for pictures.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's they know what my objective is and they support it, and the saying that a picture says 1,000 words. I think on social media it says a whole lot more than 1,000 words. So
it can make or break whatever the call to action is.
Absolutely.
Whether people actually follow through and click.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. And I had a question for you and it just popped out of my mind. All right, well, that'll come back to me. But so when you're looking at, I remember it now. So you were saying that your crew is really great at providing pictures and whatever it is that you may ask for because they get your objectives. Do you have firefighters or just members of the fire department's community who are active on social media apart from you?
Yeah, I can't quite tell. And there are some that I see on there regularly, and some are on it more than others. What I found is that most people that react on there's a lot more women than there are men as far as the demographics go. So with that being said, the firefighters we don't see regularly on there.
So it's interesting. So you say that you see women are more engaging or more on social. Do you mean within the community in general, or do you mean within your fire departments?
Within the community in general.
Okay.
Most of the comments I see are mainly from women. We still get men that will respond, but they seem to be more women.
Oh, that's interesting. So what are your biggest lessons you've learned so far? It's been 2 years that you've been on social. You've used it. You use PulsePoint to push notifications in important moments, which I think is really awesome. You use Twitter for the same reason. What are the biggest lessons that you've learned over the last 2 years?
I tell you what, the biggest thing I've learned is that if you put all egos aside and you reach out for help, the community of people that are on social media are overly excited to help you. And that's what I found with several of the agencies up north, including Mountain View. They've been fantastic. I've been on a crash course as far as learning. So you find, groups, particularly on LinkedIn. That's where I found you.
Yes, that's true.
And other professionals. And I've just learned everything. I've just soaked it all up. And then beyond that, what I would suggest that a newcomer to this, which I'm not too far off from that, is, go conservative at first. Look at your insights and see what your audience likes. Don't be the robotic, just push out a message but never respond to people's comments or anything like that. You have to engage. You get back what you put into it. So those would be my strong recommendations for somebody that's just starting off.
Excellent. And what about in terms of biggest obstacles you've faced?
You know what? I think it's for most people too. The biggest obstacle that I face are the skeptics that are out there. I'll never forget one particular conversation I had with with a coworker, and it's just, in passing, we had this casual conversation, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't believe in what you're doing.
Wow.
I don't think we should be on social media."
And what was his reason?
Well, I asked him. I just go, why is that? And he just said he didn't have a reason. Which what I'm finding is that most people don't have a substantial reason for it. It's just a belief, a feeling that they have that we shouldn't be on there.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think it goes with the lack of understanding as well?
I think with most things, yeah, that's usually the case. If you don't understand it, then what's the tendency? You just push it off and keep it at a distance.
And how have you overcome this type of internal resistance?
I go out and I get as much training as possible. And fortunately, the fire chief, like I said before, is very much on board with it. So any training I can find, I'm sent to. And so I'm learning a great deal. And I come back and I try it from different angles. Instead of just telling somebody, hey, we got this many people engaged and learning about what we do, I'll try it from a different angle. And I'll show them a different perspective. If you don't say something about an incident, somebody else can post an incident. Like we had a structure fire call where 3 houses were involved, and pictures were coming in left and right. Now, if I didn't say anything about that, it would be up to those folks to figure out what it is that went on. So when I present it that way to a lot of people, they can kind of understand where we're coming from. And some of them, it's going to be, I've got 12 years left in my career, and I might not have enough time to change their minds during that time frame. But others will see the value in it. Absolutely.
And in that particular case, where the 3 houses were in jeopardy and danger, how did you respond? What was, first of all, you have firefighters out putting out the fire. It was a fire.
Yes. Yep.
So you have them putting out the fire on the ground. You, in that particular instance, were you on the ground? Were you,
I was actually in a remote location with my radio.
Okay.
And, to the trained ear, you can tell exactly what's going on.
Okay.
And how significant it was. And then when the pictures started coming in, it just painted the picture even more so, if you will, than just the verbal that was going on. And we took advantage of it. We have a policy where we will ask for permission, so it's in writing, from the person that sent it to us. Even though they sent it to us, we'll still ask them, hey, can we use your photos?
Okay, that's good.
And then we turn it around and we share it.
And did you find that, so you had people coming in, I'm sure that it was making local news as well. Mm-hmm. So you had to make sure that you were a resource for that, so that pictures didn't let headlines go out of control.
Yes.
As that can quickly happen. So how was your response, and how did you feel that you fared in that situation or in similar situations, and lessons you took away, advice to listeners who need to as well in a crisis get ahead of the stories and get ahead of the headlines? Go ahead. Sorry.
You know what I've learned from doing this, especially with Twitter, is that I will push out the initial notification that there is an incident happening, right? And then, Usually the second one will be after the first arriving unit arrives on scene and reports the conditions. And if it's anything, then I'll update it. If it's nothing, the last update will be, whatever engine can handle and there's no fire.
Okay.
Right. So I keep people informed, and that's the system that I have. Other departments do it different ways, but that's how we choose it. So we have the notification. The next one is what's going on right now, and then the last one is the emergency is over with.
Excellent. And what about the use of hashtags?
I'm slowly learning hashtags.
Slowly learning. Well, that's good. It starts with learning, so that's really
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah. That's and in fact, I'm a lot more critical of my friends hashtagging, because now I'm starting to look at it and go, who are you hashtagging this to now? And it's a great tool. I've read that you got to be careful with it, though.
Yes, you definitely have to be careful with it.
Yeah, because you can tie yourself into something else that may not be in a positive light.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm super cautious of that. I read an article not too long ago about the New York City Police Department. Great intentions from what I'm reading. They wanted to get the community involved, and they asked for pictures of their police department in action if anybody out and about saw it. And unfortunately for them, what they didn't see in the future was that the pictures that were being hashtagged that they had created actually were more negative pictures than anything.
Hashtags are easy to be brandjacked. Mm-hmm. So that's a great case. They should have, their lack there was that they didn't do a risk assessment prior to say what could potentially go wrong. Like our intentions for this campaign are XYZ and they're very positive, but what could happen that could go wrong? What's the worst thing that can happen?
That is a perfect way to put it. They didn't analyze their risk assessment.
And hashtags, even if you look, so I got the pleasure of speaking with Chris Shung and Shino Tanaka from Mountain View Police Department in an episode of this podcast. And they described a crisis that they experienced where there was a mountain lion loose in their city limits. Mm-hmm. So, and what I love, the story is great. If you haven't listened to that podcast, I definitely recommend. Shino tells the story very vividly and very, very informatively. But one of the aspects that I loved is that she knew that, so hashtags can go the wrong way when you use them without fully understanding how they can go the wrong way without doing that risk assessment. But at the same time, in terms of crisis communications or emergency management, hashtags can be really, really great. A really great way to funnel information and for people to follow updates around a crisis, no matter who's posting those updates, as well as on your end, a great way to filter through information and make sure you're not missing anything. So they can be really great. But what I love about it, speaking of risk analysis for hashtags, is that while this cougar was in their city limits, Shino is responsible for communicating via social to the citizens, and they've built, as you know, this really great community of followers. So she knew that she needed a hashtag to continue to update the community with the events that were to occur with this mountain lion. And it was an evening that this crisis happened, as often they do. I believe the story was she was in the process of just about to feed her son and supper, and she sat down and she said, okay, I know that we need a hashtag. So she started thinking about what that could be. Her first instinct was to go with MV Cougar. And she didn't. She chose MV Puma instead. One, it's shorter. But two, the real reason that got her mind off of that is cougar, the term of an older woman dating a younger man. She didn't want any possibility of that going astray, which I thought was so great because especially in the heat of the moment, she had that logic to think logically about the hashtag, and the hashtag MV Puma ended up trending nationally for about a week.
Oh, wow.
Which was, the crisis was a success. They managed it. They got really lucky and they had a really great team, but the communications as well were such a great success. And so it's just, I think it's a really great story of being able to assess the risk of a hashtag, even when you know that you absolutely need to use one, but just doing that as safely as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And then, you know what, since you brought that up, that kind of reminded me, is that when you will have media people contact you on Twitter about, incidents that they're overhearing, and that you gotta resist the temptation to push information out quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that can backfire pretty darn quick. And unfortunately, that ambulance crash that we had, my source that was getting me the information said that there were 7 people involved. Well, it turned out it was an autocorrect problem.
Oh no.
On the phone, so it read like 7. But in actuality, there were only 4 people involved. So I quickly had to, swallow my pride, send an update to everybody and said, hey, 4 people involved.
But first of all, it's very good that you did that. Second of all, that's a really great lesson. So often we feel overwhelmed with the need for immediacy on social and the demand for immediacy. And you raise a really good point that we really do. We can't succumb to that, yet though you do need to have a voice and state that you're looking into it, or that you're on it, or that they can rely on you for more information. There's a very fine line between making mistakes that jeopardize your credibility as well.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point. So what is next for Garden Grove Fire Department?
I'm not quite sure at this point. I'm actually in a lurking mode, for lack of a better term.
Well,
I'm just watching other people's pages. We're actually, something that we're discussing right now is to actually meet with the people that are on social media in person. And so that's an idea that we've been discussing, of having coffee with the fire department. Like
a tweet up or something?
No, just actually out in person, just announcing it and tying a more personal feel to it. And, it's not your social media.
No, but that's awesome.
Traditional, but I think it's just another level for us. And then that way we can actually take pictures, if people allow it, and share with the rest of the community of, hey, you know what, we're your guys, and this, you hired us, and, we're out here for you, so that's our goal.
That really ties in nicely with building the trust and the real community, the real relationships. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't just have to be virtual.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love that idea. Another good police department, actually, to follow, I don't know if you are, is the Toronto Police Department in Canada. Okay. And Chris Boddy, Boddy, is great to follow on Twitter and stuff. He's the police chief of the Toronto Police Department. Actually, he'll be on a podcast in the following, I think in 2 weeks it's scheduled to go. And I found him, I think, on Twitter, because he was just posting. He's got the picture of his, him in uniform as his picture, his profile picture, and he's tweeting about the police department going and shaving their legs for good causes, and meaning all men, not the women, and just like these really fun things that humanize the police department. So that might be one to reach out to. He's really friendly. He's really awesome, as well as to follow for cool ideas. I love that. The public service industry is really, you guys are really connecting with one another. You're following each other, and you're learning from each other and able to share. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, that you're developing this community amongst yourselves that I get the pleasure of watching and chatting with, interesting people like you, and watching it evolve. So I think that's really cool.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to get on the phone with you today too and discussing this. This is fun stuff for me. I really enjoy it. I'm blessed that I have this job, and it doesn't feel like a job really, so.
The best kind. And I think that I have a friend, or I know a fighter in close to my home, not in my town, but a few towns over. And I remember him telling me just that when he, it was a long process. I don't know what the process is like in the States, but in Canada, it's this really long process, and you go on this waiting list, and, it's really a calling that you're following. And that when he finally made it, I remember him saying the first day that he walked into the fire station, from his first day on the job, he just kind of stood outside and thought, wow, I'm a firefighter. And he still feels like that every day. And this is like 8 years ago that he told me this. And he still feels like that. So I think that it's a group of exceptional human beings that are just doing really great things to save their, the people within their community and to protect them. And so bringing social media to that aspect and finding ways to share important communications, and that can go for, the fun events that you're attending or bringing your community together to straight through to emergency communications, is just so important and so inspiring to watch.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's, it's one of the best jobs ever, for lack of better description, I guess.
So I know that you're in the process now of you're learning as much as you can, and I know that I can't help in terms of the marketing strategy that you're undertaking, the marketing side of the social media, but do you have any questions for me that I could help with while we're on the call together?
You know what? That government seems like, and I can't speak for private business because I've been out of that for a long time, but it seems like government goes at a little slower pace than the private sector. That's just my perception. Sometimes, I have to remind myself, the pace that I do need to go, and it actually helps me out. I'm just kind of curious. When you talked about earlier about pushing the envelope with Mountain View,
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go from here besides giving the regular information and the crisis communication? Because without, if you have the crisis communication daily, you're probably working for a large agency that has a larger area and more potential. But for a smaller agency such as ours, it doesn't happen on a regular basis. So, to a smaller agency, what would you recommend as far as getting more people involved in what we're doing?
That's a great question. I think that, well, first of all, government, you're right, government agencies tend to move slower. However, there are some, and you're an example of that, as well as a lot of, a number of the other departments and people that we've spoken about during this call are examples of how sometimes I feel like individuals within government agencies are moving so much quicker than organizations who have freedom, but not so much. They still have the same obstacles internally to bypass, and not everybody's on the same page. But in terms of going from here or getting more people involved and on board, I always say that it starts with education. Mm-hmm. So especially when you're confronted with, people who don't really get it, or people who don't maybe get social, and then they don't really get why the fire department has to be on social or the benefits of it. It starts with educating, and then not every organization, actually it's rare that most organizations don't have to deal with crisis communications on a regular basis, unless you're, the International Committee of the Red Cross or NATO, or, it's more infrequent when you're lucky. But it's still something that needs to be planned for and trained for, because when the time comes, it happens quickly, as you know, and things escalate quickly. And if you're not able, I like to say that you don't want to have experience in a crisis because you don't want to have to face a crisis, but when a crisis strikes, you want to have that experience. So it starts with the education internally, getting people to understand, using case studies and getting people to understand what it's about, what the purpose is, what the goals are, looking at where other organizations have succeeded in crisis communications or crisis management because of XYZ that you would like to bring into your corporate culture, and then training them, then developing a plan saying that, in these types of occasions or situations, this is how we respond, and here's a chart to help us, find those answers, whether it's a triage chart or response flow chart, to give you something at your fingertips that's predetermined when everything is calm, so that in the heat of the moment you have something very logical, even if emotions are running high, to fall back on, and then to train.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense.
It's the most that you can do. And training can be fun in terms of, we do, for example, these crisis simulations that are crazy simulations. They simulate everything from Twitter and Facebook to news articles to the search engines to having reporters calling in asking for quotes. And you have your team there working together. There's no right or wrong answer because it's not a real crisis. All it is an exercise for people to grow from together. And you get that experience. And you also get that bonding, that relationship building internally. And it also helps to open up some perspectives when you have people, pushing back and saying, we still don't get it, we still don't get it. Put them into a simulation and they might just get it.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. But I think you're definitely on the right track.
Oh, thank you very much.
Tang, where can everybody find and follow all of your online activity?
The Garden Grove Fire Department is our Facebook page, and on Twitter our handle is Garden Grove Fire. Which, by the way, when you're creating a new Twitter account, make sure that it's a shorter handle.
Yeah, advice that so many people don't take.
Oh my gosh! So now I'm like, okay, do I ditch my 300 followers or? So I would say, yeah, think about your handle. And honestly, I like Garden Grove Fire. So I think we're going to just stick with it. Yeah. So we're on Twitter at Garden Grove Fire. And then my professional account is in LinkedIn. So, just look me up. And then what else do we have going? And then if you have Pulse Point, for your community, find out if your community, all you have to do is search it when you download the free app and find out if your community is on board with Pulse Point. If not, it's a great tool. You should approach your fire department about it. And the people in our city that follow it love it because they know every single incident that's going on anytime they open that app and look at it.
Very cool. And is it usually the fire department that's in charge of that app?
Yes, it's solely a fire department application.
Oh, is it? Because I'm pretty sure I have it on my phone. I've downloaded it in the past, but I'm in Montreal when I'm home, and we don't use it, or at least my community doesn't use it. So that's an interesting. I might actually go and talk to my fire department.
And I think, it's just a matter of getting the word out. Some people have never heard of it, but as soon as they hear about it, they're on board with it. And the company will come out. I've spoken to the founder. He's a retired fire chief from Northern California. And how that application actually began was he was having lunch at a restaurant and saw one of his engines go with the lights and siren to a business right next door to him. And it turned out it was a cardiac arrest victim.
Wow.
And he sat there and had no idea the whole time there was a cardiac arrest. And as we all know, time is tissue when it comes to the heart. And that was the whole point of that application, was to get people that are willing to help get involved.
And that know how to help. Good for him.
Yeah. So our campaign isn't so much just a social media campaign. It's a social media and electronic communication.
Excellent. I love that. I talk a lot about social media, but I'm a firm believer in just leveraging technology in terms of, we have all of this technology at our disposal that enables real-time communications and push notifications and geo-targeting and all of these wonderful, wonderful tools that are very beneficial in a crisis when, like you're saying, time is of the essence.
Yes. Yep.
So I'm good for you guys, and keep up, keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to continue to follow.
Thank you.
And if ever there's questions, you know where to reach me.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Tang, for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Okay, you're welcome. Same here. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of the Crisis Intelligence Podcast. We appreciate all of your support, so if you could share this podcast with colleagues, friends, or anybody that you think would benefit from listening to it, we'd really appreciate you doing so. Also, if you could head on over to iTunes and or Stitcher to leave us a review so that other people who are interested in listening to the podcast can hear directly from you on what to expect and what you think of the podcast, we would really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions on topics of crisis communication that you'd like to hear us discuss, feel free to email us anytime at crisis@agnesday.com. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and I look forward to talking even more crisis intelligence with you next Sunday.